Session, motion, go into executive session. Everybody else has to leave, and then you come back in at 6:30. Okay?
We don't have to go downstairs?
We're not going downstairs.
We're not going downstairs.
Caleb,
Okay.
you all set? Yep. Good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for February 22nd, 2022 to order. Get a motion to go into executive session.
I move that we go into executive session to discuss two items. First, pursuant to general law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant in aid requirements. Parentheses, Purpose 7, the open meeting law. General law, Chapter 30A, Section 22F and G, to review, approve, and/or discuss the possible release of executive session minutes, meeting minutes dated December 9th, 2021. The second item, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions, and the chair has determined that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and before I go to roll call vote, I just announced that we will be going back into open session no later than 6:30 PM. Roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, back to order. We started tonight's meeting in executive session where we approved executive session minutes from December 9th. We did not approve releasing those minutes, but we did approve the minutes. And then we also discussed with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions, if the chair determines that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position, no decisions were made. We adjourned at 6:23, and now we are opening this meeting at 6:30. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Quick housekeeping, we're gonna pull G, which is discussion and possible vote to approve the SAFER grant for the fire department staffing up into the joint meeting with the Finance Committee. We're gonna take that up as part of the budget. It's appropriate on the agenda item, so we're moving that up. Tonight is a joint meeting. The first part of the meeting is discussion and possible vote for the Board of Selectmen to approve or amend the town administrator's draft fiscal year 2023 budget. This is a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. Second part of that is for us to hand the budget over to the Finance Committee. We're not handing it over as a finished product. We got this late this afternoon, and we will not be turning this over as a finished product. Normally, we don't anyway. Normally, there's work to be done for the next couple months before we approve it. But tonight, by way of charter, we are gonna hand the budget to the Finance Committee so they can start their work. John, do you wish to call your meeting to order?
Sure. Good evening. My name's John Chory. I'm Chair of the Finance Committee in Harwich. I'd like to call our finance meeting to order. Did I get a second at all?
Second.
Second? Okay. We do have a quorum present, and I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mark Keller?
Aye.
Dan Torek?
Aye.
Angelo Lamonte? Brian Wheeler?
Aye.
Mark Armors? Aye. And John Chory. Six of us are present. One is on the call, Dale Kennedy from Canada, excuse me, Florida.
You look close.
Florida.
From Florida.
Aye.
So, we're ready to hear you.
Excellent. Carol's not up here yet. She's doing some last-minute work, so Chief, I think I'll start with you. If you want to just give us an overview of the grant. We all have it in our packet. Finance Committee is here tonight. David, I'm not sure what they have and what they've seen, but you could give us an overview. Thank you for the extensive packet. We don't need to go over the whole thing.
Okay, you're welcome. David Blank, Fire Chief. Craig, you want to come up here also? I'm going to actually defer to Craig for the majority of this. But in a nutshell, we recognized a potential with a grant opportunity. It's the same grant program that we've used for a lot of the equipment purchases to secure staffing for a 3-year period for the town. For not zero costs, but limited costs, basically all fringe benefits and overtime, salary and wages would be covered And then in the fourth year, the town will be responsible to pick up the full cost of the employees. We've identified some areas where we have concerns, both with future trends of staffing around us, as well as the housing market and our ability to secure employees. So we decided to pursue this grant opportunity and then bring it before, for at least for the discussion, to see where we can end up. Craig is really kind of the architect behind the whole thing, so I'm going to have him just kind of run through it briefly, what the high points are, and then we'll answer any questions the board has.
Thank you, David.
Boards have.
Just briefly, Carol, welcome. I've pulled G up from the bottom of the agenda and put it into the joint meeting because it is budget related. So we're gonna let the fire department do the SAFER grant talk, and then we'll get into the budget.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you guys for the opportunity for us to come and speak to you about this. So what the chief has stated about addressing some concerns that we have with our current staffing model is we have a minimum staffing of 7 firefighters on a shift right now. Full staffing is 8 firefighters, but when someone's out on vacation, sick, training, we drop down to 7. So there's 4 in headquarters and 3 at Station 2. So what we're trying to identify and alleviate is one person from being at the station by themselves. And in headquarters, when the ambulance goes out the door, every single time the ambulance goes out the door and goes to treat a patient, 3 individuals get on that truck and they go and they help out the citizens. The captain, the shift officers back by themselves. And they're back by themselves until we can try to get coverage in, which is somebody from home, and sometimes that's successful and sometimes that's not. And we've addressed now that with housing and with the costs, we're gonna see definitely a drastic decrease in the amount of people that can actually afford a home within a response district. So this is what we're trying to identify and see if we can improve our staffing, enhance the staffing, and overall safety-wise, not have one person at the fire station by themselves for that next subsequent call in the headquarters district. So we looked at the SAFER grant right now because they're running a program right now where they would pay for the salary and benefits for firefighters for 3 years. They basically will pay for everything with exception of gear and the academy training at whether it's Bridgewater or Stowe for the Massachusetts Fire Academy. But everything else is taken care of for that first 3 years. Health insurance is wise, Medicare, the pension obligations for those employees. Year 4, that's where the discussion has to happen. The money would now come back to the town, the taxpayers. How we're gonna finance them after year 4 is really the crust of the conversation that needs to happen. So we have submitted for the grant. We have submitted for all the costs that we could accrue that they would pay for. And when the grant gets awarded, if we were to get the grant, we have 30 days to acknowledge it and 30 days to accept it. We also have 6 months to implement the grant. So we have 6 months of retention to try to find the 4 employees to get them on shift. So I'll open to any questions that you guys have.
Craig, could you just go over year 1, 2, 3, and then 4 with us on your chart on the cost to the town?
Yep. So year 1 would cost the town $14,649.16. The salaries are taken care of. The equipment costs in year 1 are $52,000. $52,828 is for the equipment. That is our fire gear and some of the other costs that are just to outfit new firefighters, academy costs, and also some overtime to cover back those individuals that are going to the academy. Some overtime changes for that is, as noted, is $45,764. And it would be it would be a decrease. So that's an offset. That would be helping out in that year one. Year two, it's zero. We've already paid for their gear in year one, so there's no other costs. We've paid for their academy training. The overtime changes, another decrease of $20,000. And then year three is zero. Overtime changes would start to ramp back up because we would start putting them in a position where we would maintain 8 people on a shift. We would have 9 to start, but then we would drop down to 8. So the overtime costs would start to go up at that point in year three. Year four is the large number. So salary and benefits, it's estimated at $497,000. Overtime with an increase of $89,000, and the total cost to the town per year would be $586,000. The numbers that were put forward are based on a 2% COLA. It just is an estimated of what a 2% COLA is. Pension obligations would be 20.94%, which is what the finance director gave me for what the obligations are to the town, as well as a Medicare that we've paid out over the last few years. So those numbers are pretty much what we know that they're going to be. But there are unknowns when it comes to cost of living. Obviously, the adjustments, the contractual obligations, and any other costs. Health insurance, if health insurance decides to go a certain direction, I can't completely figure out what the health insurance is going to be 4 years out, 5 years out. So those are the numbers that we came up with. Monetary-wise, the salary and wages are for firefighter paramedics, which is the high bar, which is for what our contract is. That would be probably very difficult to hire 4 paramedics right now. They're few and far between. Every community right now is trying to hire paramedics, and we would most likely hire the lesser certification, which is the EMTs, or 2 paramedics and 2 EMTs, which would bring all these numbers down. But those are the numbers right now, and like I said, open to any questions that I have. Like I said, these are estimates, and they're rough to the point where I can't dial them in, 100% because I don't know what it's going to be like in 4 years.
Thank you, Craig.
Yep.
Taking a quick break to go back to public comment announcement because I missed it. And I don't want anyone in the room to sit here through all of this if they don't want to. So anyone for public comment announcement? Mary's supposed to kick me under the table when I make a mistake. They put a divider in between us. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Not
Why
that
are you
what
staring at me?
not that what you're going to be talking about isn't interesting. My name's Ed McManus, and as you know, one of the I think more rewarding things I did in my term as a selectman was be the co-chair of the building committee for the high school. And since then, I've continued to be involved at the high school as the Kiwanis advisor to the Mount High School Key Club. As you know, Key Clubs are the high school version of Kiwanis and are community service organizations dedicated to doing a variety of things in the community. Our Key Club does everything with helping the Cranberry Festival during the fairs and festivals with setup and takedown, to helping the Turkey Trot in Chatham on the course, to doing programs with child care centers, nurseries. They did a wonderful program in conjunction with the movie theater in Chatham this Christmas by being the ushers for all the small children, seeing a benefit showing of Elf. It was just wonderful. They were all dressed up in their Christmas finery. But they do a lot of good things around the community for us. And they're a great group of kids. This Sunday at the Seal Restaurant, their Seal is doing a fundraiser for the Key Club. If you attend, and I have some blue cards, if you give them one of the cards, whatever you spend, 10% will be donated to help support the activities of the Key Club. One of the activities that they're raising funds for now is to attend the district education conference, which will be taking place in the beginning of April. And it's a conference where they learn about community service, how to plan community service projects, leadership, how to run meetings and run organizations. It'll be held down in Springfield. And one of the nice things about it this year, for the first time in many years, a student from this area is being elected Lieutenant Governor of District 12, which is the district that the Cape and just off Cape high schools are in. As you know, Kiwanis is an international organization, and so is Key Club. And they have lieutenant governors and governors of the division, and a national board, an international board of directors. Internationally, there are some 280,000 Kiwanis members and some 530,000 Key Club members. So it's a very vibrant organization, and I think the young woman who is the current president of the Monomoy Key Club, Christy Beckley, who's a student from Chatham, will be elected and installed as the lieutenant governor for the New England division of Key Club. So, anyway, with that, I'll give you all one of the cards, and if you can make it by, and this goes all day long, whether it's just a latte in the morning or dinner and a couple drinks at dinner.
Thank you, Ed.
In the evening, 10% of whatever you spend will go to help benefit the Key Club.
Leave the rest of them on the back table for anyone in here interested.
I didn't hand you one.
Thank you.
You already had one.
I met him out in the hallway.
I thought maybe you
Give it to him.
He doesn't like me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Kevin Considine, Deputy Chief. I have public comment. I do have to stay, though, but thank you anyways. Thrilled to announce we're going to have a polar plunge. Special Olympics Massachusetts, who I think many know we support greatly. They have 9 plunges throughout the state this winter. We're happy that Harwich is one of those, and the Harwich Police are sponsoring that at Red River Beach on March 26th. Registration begins at 10 a.m. and the plunge is at 11. That's March 26th at 11 a.m. More information can be found at Polar Plunge MA. That's Polar Plunge MA. We have a Harwich Police team. We're always looking for new members. And you can even be a towel holder if you don't want to get wet. And we're fortunate to team up with Cindy to get hopefully some businesses involved. And on my side, I'm trying to get the law enforcement community involved from the Cape.
And as Kevin said, I'm Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber, and we're actually going to throw it out there to businesses and other organizations to actually challenge one another. So I think we've got the word that they can dress up.
Sure.
Fabulous. So we would like to first throw it out to all of you to join us. And then help get everyone, maybe your counterparts in other towns, to join. This is, as Kevin said, for the Special Olympics, and we are excited. We did this 3 years ago when we were allowed to, and got a great showing. So March 26th, Red River Beach, and go Harwich.
Can we be in as the towel holders?
That's my job already.
I let Cindy invite all you.
I'm
Thank you.
gonna be in the Bahamas, but I hope the rest of the group joins you
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll do it remotely.
remotely. Anyone else for public comment and announcement? All right, you're back up. Questions, we'll start with the Board of Selectmen, Larry. Comments, questions?
Thank you for the detailed report. It was, I think it was well justified. My concerns I expressed last time when it first came up was we've had experience, at least one I know from the past, where we hired someone temporary and then struggled to find the money to keep them long-term. So I appreciate you looking for this. I'd like sooner rather than later some thought about how we're going to fund this long-term, because once they're here, they're not going away, quite frankly. It doesn't happen. The question I have is, Explain to me why in your, it dropped from 9 to 8 when we're talking about the salary. Because you're hiring 4, right?
Right.
And it's 9, so you lose, I don't know, I lost the train of thought there when you go from each shift and from 9
Sure,
to
so
8.
right now, the shift strength is 8 firefighters on a shift, so we have 32 firefighters. But we drop down to 7 when anybody takes a vacation day, a holiday, sick leave. So our minimum right now is 7. If we were to be able to hire 4, we would be able to increase our minimum to 8. So our
Got that
total
part,
strength
but-
would be 9.
yeah.
So,
But then you mentioned when talking about overtime, you go from 9 to 8. Did I miss something there?
So what we do now, basically, the simple solution or explanation is we cover it 55%. 55% of the leave that we have, we cover. That formula stays intact because we're increasing the shift from 8 to 9, but we're also increasing the minimum from 7 to 8. So that's why there's not a huge overtime savings with hiring 4, is because we're actually increasing the minimum shift staffing, so there would always be 5 on duty at headquarters, 3 on duty
So
at
even
Station
hiring
2.
a 4 doesn't cover your shift demands, is what you're saying.
No, it's actually, I mean, and I don't say this in a negative way, but it's a drop in the bucket for really where we need to be an effective, not relying on overtime to staff the station fire department. But we also recognize the economic world we live in, and what we do right now, to Michael's point, when we had this conversation earlier, it works. There are some times when it doesn't work as well as it could, but it works. So, and I think I want to emphasize that. What we do right now is effective. I don't know that it's necessarily as efficient as it could be, but it's certainly effective, and public safety in this town is not in jeopardy by not having these 4 personnel hired. It's a way for us to kind of predict the future and make sure that we're better prepared as changes come.
I don't want to beat this, but just follow. So what you're saying is that hiring these people, the overtime you list here is actually less than it would be without these folks.
Yeah, correct. Well, a little bit less. So it actually stays moderately the same, and there's some increases because we have more training overtime and everything else. Originally, when we talked about this, the plan was to hire 8, which would increase the shift strength to 10, but we would leave the minimum at 8. And what that would do is there would be savings now because we would not fill the first 2 vacancies. That's where you're gonna see, this town is, since I've been here, my 30 years, we've always kind of balanced overtime versus personnel. So instead of hiring full-time personnel and paying benefits, we've spent money on overtime and using existing personnel to backfill vacancies. So it's kind of, so there is a little bit of savings in overtime, but it's offset because there's some increases in overtime by ramping up the shift staffing. I don't feel like I got you there, but
Not entirely, but I think I'm
Okay.
closer. Just as a general comment, I do like the idea of adding more people rather than extended overtime, just from another environment, but when you get more and more overtime, I get more concerned about safety concerns.
Yep.
Yeah, just for
Yep.
people getting tired and all that, so I do like that approach, but
And-
I do push you to develop a long-term plan too, so we know what we're headed for.
Okay.
Julie?
I thank you too for the packet information. It's extensive and really helpful in identifying the areas and why you would need to increase the shift. And I would echo a lot of what Larry's just said in the sense that I would love to see these 4 officers, but we also need to figure out how we pay for them in year 4, as I know you already know that. You know, I think I struggle with that a little bit just with what we're facing. One other thing I did have a question on was the number of incidences. It looks like, you know, the only other town, and we're not really necessarily comparable, but similar, looks like maybe Brewster. But in terms of the incidents, they have like half of the incidents we have. And you have a 7-man shift, or woman, just to clarify.
Yep.
And they've got 4, and they only have 1 fire station. Now, we have doubled, 4,351, and we have the two stations, as I noted, and the incidents are, for Harwich, 136 per member.
Correct.
Is that somewhat related to having Fontaine and, no, not at all, just the number of the population?
So, yes and no. Fontaine's part of it. When Fontaine changed from a doctor's office to what it is now, we had about a 700% increase in runs there. We were doing like 60 runs a year there. We're now doing several hundred, whatever that math is, and I'm not a math guy, so I'm not gonna try and make it up. But that is also stabilized. And we're busy everywhere else in town too. So we saw a spike where we hit about 5,000 runs, which is where this kind of tops out. We've dropped down a little bit. COVID certainly played a factor in that. We're ramping back up again. But since I've been here, we have always increased 3 to 5% in runs year over year. So we're really only getting busier. And as doctor offices become more or less willing to squeeze people in, the answer is hang up, call 911, and go to the emergency room. So.
Thank you for that clarification. I
Mary?
don't have any other questions.
Mary?
Like the others have said, that's a great package because you could read through it and actually understand what you were talking about, other than a few questions I had to ask you. So I appreciate that, and I'll be honest, I'm very torn. I get the goal, I get the incidents per firefighter, that made sense to me, but I'm worried about the math, so I don't know. Maybe we do 2, I don't know if that even helps you. If you took them on, and in 3 years we couldn't find the way to pay for them, you'd be looking at a layoff, right?
Yeah, there's no obligation for the community to retain them with this grant.
Are they hired understanding that they're being hired through a grant, and it may only be a 3-year commitment?
I would think so. Yeah, we would have to make that well known to them.
Yeah,
And that's not obviously something that we would want to
yeah.
go down the
Right.
road.
No, I know.
We want to, if we were to commit to hiring anybody, as we've learned back in early 2000, we need to have a funding mechanism.
Yeah. That's all for me, Michael.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you answered the first question about obligation. I'm going to address part of this to Julie. Actually, the more analogous situation is Dennis in land mass and in citizenry, in total population. And they have a minimum shift strength of 10, whereas we have 7, and they have total shift personnel of 48, and we have 32. That's the comparable response area, at least locally.
The second station adds, so, it's hard to compare, and it is what it is. We are Harwich, and I've always kind of prided ourselves, prided the department on being, we had to take care of Harwich problems. And you can compare us to everybody else, but most of the stations around, most of the departments around us are single station towns. It creates a much different staffing model because you're not trying to maintain a minimum in each firehouse. So 2 fire stations, I would agree with you. Dennis is more comparable. They're a little bit busier than we are, a little bit bigger. But they did a safer grant, which is when they got to the 10, and that was their argument to get to it.
I was just bringing it up for that reason.
Yep.
It's more comparable. But if we could find a way to do this, at least my sentiment is of all the organizations we have that we govern, through the years, yours has been extremely well run. I don't think that you're winding up going out and padding anything. So if this is something that's going to be a need, we're probably going to have to address it one way or the other, with the grant or without the grant. So I'm just looking forward to some sort of discussion with Joe, and Carol, and Megan about how we can swing this.
Where is Dennis with the paying for theirs? They're into the paying cycle now?
Yeah, theirs was, I believe, they're in year 5. So when they got their grant, it was a percentage for each year. So the first year was 100%. The second year was like 30%. The third year was like 50%. I don't remember what the steps were. And what they started doing was they funded year 4 in year 1. They set up a special account. So by the time they got to year 4, it wasn't a big hit. and they had funded it over the years, the chief was adamant, and Dennis, of not wanting to go out to an override in year 4 because of the amount of time, effort, energy, money spent in training the people. You know, we'd just be creating a farm team for somebody else because the people would be definitely well sought after, but.
And I think I know the answer to this, but in tonight's budget, none of this is in tonight's budget, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm with the rest of them. How are we gonna pay for this in years out? And I think that that's a conversation we need to have with the finance director. How does this work at town meeting, though? I mean, is it because they're new positions? They have to go before the town for new positions, correct? Year 4.
When I asked Joe about that, he said because they're existing positions, it's just an increase in staffing, and we haven't done it, we didn't do it with the last 2. They were just put in the budget and we funded them.
Don?
Mr. Chair, I would disagree because there's a staffing plan. And the numbers of people that are in that staffing plan mean something. Town meeting has jurisdiction over that.
I would just suggest to the board members that, so we don't have to have the entire conversation again when we meet with Joe and Carol on this in the next meeting, that we clarify those. And Carol's here tonight, so, and shaking her head up and down, we'll clarify with her how we're gonna pay for this. And I know the boards do a 5-year plan, so maybe this gets into a 5-year plan at some point, but the residents need to know it. There's a lot of buts. So where you're at now, David, I take away from the conversation, you are managing it very well. We're doing fine. But the board consistently talks about a housing crisis, and that affects where our firefighters live. And it's getting pushed further and further away. Yarmouth out to Plymouth. So that's something that the board needs to really look at. And I think when the crisis happens, it's gonna happen across the entire Cape, and everybody's gonna be looking for firefighters. And the cost of living here isn't going down, it's only going up. Overtime versus new hires. I would argue overtime, and I think that at least one member of the finance committee disagrees with me, but it's more expensive than hiring a new person, even though we're gonna be paying pension, because the overtime rate is the overtime rate. The constant negotiations on contracts and health benefits and everything that goes along with a new hire, I believe is higher than overtime. With that said, I know for the past 7 years at least, we've talked about how to get our overtime rates down. I think that's all I have for tonight, and then I'll get some questions, I think, to the finance committee now, and then we'll go back to Carol and then David in the very near future. We'll get some of the answers to what we asked tonight, and then have a standalone meeting on this grant to give you a nod, yes or no, so that you don't waste any more time. And thanks again for the detailed presentation, because it made a lot of sense, and I think most of the answers were in there. John, I'll open it up to you guys, and keep in mind we have a lot to talk about, so.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and the board. And before the meeting started, I spoke with the board, asking roughly how this meeting was going to pan out, because I had saw it at, a joint meeting with us in the finance committee, and we could be here for 3-4 hours. And Michael explained to me what the objective was, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. So with that, I have a bunch of questions too, but I'll start with our board members. We'll start with our newest one, Mark Keller.
Thanks. I do have just one question. For the fire department, in the next 3 years, are you going to have some retirements that those guys could fill in? So that in 2 or 3 years, you don't have to fund 4 positions, you may have 2 positions filled? Just one thought as I...
So 2 answers. Yes, we'll have some retirements. We're budgeted for 2 in the next year, and probably over the next 3 or 4 years, probably 2 or 3 more. But the goal is to increase staffing. So if we just fill those positions with those, then we're retreating back down to where we are now. So we haven't really accomplished what we're trying to with the goal of the grant.
Dan, I guess if you want to have any questions, you want to go up to the mic?
Probably easiest to go up to the microphone, and they'll step aside if you're gonna say anything, so the public can see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just have a comment, I don't have a question.
Still gotta make it so that people at home can see it. Or you can kick John out of his seat, whichever you prefer.
We both got knees. Mine was just a week ago, so I win.
Yeah, sorry, Dan.
I have an infection in my right knee, and it's no fun. But I would just like to take the opportunity to make a comment, because in early November, I had a heart episode.
And these guys came, and I cannot speak highly enough about the kind of service and treatment that I got. They do a great job, and I feel very safe. And for that matter, all of us should feel very safe if we ever have that kind of an episode, which I hope you don't.
Thank you, Dave.
Angela, any comment at all? Yeah. Good.
Want me to help you?
We're aging here, Mike.
Another reason for more firefighters.
I think the presentation was quite good, and the activity that people are trying to get is quite good. So I think that the key is to try and find the money to cover the 4th years. It may be as simple as looking at things that we thought we might want to do in the next 4 years and cancel that. But I think this is a key thing that must be done.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Angela. Mark, anything?
No questions.
Brian?
No.
Again, in the spirit of time, I just have a couple questions, and you don't have to answer them, Chief. I'll have you folks come back, and Deputy Chief, come back and give us a full presentation to the board and stuff, because I don't want to tie up the whole meeting. But just for food for thought, for you to think about, for folks to think about too. Some of them have been answered. You answered the paramedic question, whether these have to be paramedics or EMTs. You answered that one. How much do you expect, and I think we got it kind of answered, you know, your overtime budget this year has been budgeted at $1,004,000, roughly 36% of your salary and wages budget. How much do you expect that to go down with these 4 new hires, or don't you expect it to go down?
I mean, if you look, we really do not anticipate, there'll be some savings in emergency overtime. As the deputy explained, when the ambulance goes out, we hire a firefighter back. We would not have to hire that first firefighter back, so there'll be some savings. It's kind of hard to quantify, which is why I didn't count it in the number. But because we're moving the staffing, we're increasing the minimum as well as the total shift strength, there really is not a savings in overtime.
Okay, and again, we can have more discussion on that. More discussion too, I'd like to know why, I'd just like to know education-wise, why we have 3 people per ambulance versus, does the state have a minimum of 2 per ambulance?
There's some requirements in terms of medical control and having 2 paramedics in the back of the ambulance for certain protocols and treatments. It's pretty much an industry standard that we run with 3 in the ambulance, primarily also due to the length of our transport time.
And I fully understand it. You know, to Dan's point, that you have excellent, I haven't been a recipient of it, but I have neighbors who have. And so you explained if we at the end of 3 years, we could lay these off without no penalty, they don't have to pay them back to the government. You are fully staffed though right now, right, currently? Okay. And the other one with retirement stuff too, but thank you, Chief. That's it, Michael.
That's it. Carol, anything you want to add to the conversation tonight? Okay. We'll be back to you.
Okay. I really appreciate the opportunities to present in front of you. I think it's an important conversation to have, even if we don't have to be able to execute it, but thank you very much for your time.
Carol? Budget. We got a very lengthy packet today, this afternoon. Prior to the meeting and you coming up, we discussed absorbing it a little bit more. But the Finance Committee's all received it now, the Board of Selectmen's all received it now, and I would just open it up quickly to the board for conversation. Carol, I said in the beginning, by way of charter, tonight's the night we need to turn this over to the Finance Committee. Did that saying that we will not be giving them any final version. And I'm not sure that you're gonna get a lot of changes from the board tonight or requests for changes. I think we'll wait and then agenda this a bunch more times going forward after the board absorbs the full budget. So if you don't have anything to start with, I'll have the board ask questions.
I actually do.
Go ahead.
I have printed documents in binders for the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. They're here, and we can distribute those for you. Some folks like to have a document to read in their hands. There are two changes that are worthy to note in this budget versus what was presented to the Board of Selectmen on February 7th. February 14th, as you are aware, Monomoy School District came in with a proposed budget. Well, that budget was below what they had originally proposed, so that change is reflected in this budget that's being presented. In addition to that, there was $7,500 in police expenses that needed to be added to the budget. So it was a net reduction of about $75,000 from what was originally provided to the Board of Selectmen. Other than that, I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Carol. I'll start with Don.
Anything I could possibly say, I'd be speaking off the top of my head. I need the time to look it over.
Mary?
Likewise, I did a quick run-through, but I need a lot more time at it. But thank you, it looks very thorough.
Julie?
I feel the same. In order to really comment, I need to look further at it, but I do appreciate the printed version because I need that.
Larry?
I'll chime in because there's a lot of details and have a chance to look at, and especially, I think we all are, waiting to look at how it compares to the budget message, which we had some positions, how do we pay for those, and some other activities. So we'll be paying a lot of attention, but good work.
Carol, on one comment I read in there, I believe it said that we weren't utilizing the 3.6 million that's left in free cash. Did I read that correctly?
For your operating budget, does not pertain to what you may use it for capital or snow and ice or some other items that you typically fund with free cash. Last fiscal year, the Board of Selectmen, or the Town of Harwich, funded Monomoy's capital purchases. They funded Wastewater Enterprise Fund operating budget, and then some small equipment for the Town of Harwich, such as IT equipment. And this year, we have not proposed to use any of that to support the operating budget. And with that said, the operating budget is a balanced budget. When I say that, what I mean by that is that all of your expenses are covered by estimated revenues or real estate and personal property tax revenues. And as such, that should be important for the board to understand. What it does not include, and this is really important for us to consider and as you move forward, it does not include any COLAs for any employees. And that's significant because puts the board in a difficult situation, in my opinion. But so nevertheless, the Wastewater Enterprise Fund, this will be the second year that fund has budgeted for operating expenses. With that said, in FY21, when free cash was certified, retained earnings are also certified for your enterprise funds. So retained earnings were certified for your wastewater enterprise fund at just over $200,000. You could use that to pay for the operating budget for FY23 for wastewater. This year, we anticipated that wastewater fund was going to have operating expenses associated with Chatham. That hasn't happened yet. So you've got excess funds there. When free cash is certified for FY22, you'll be able to use those in the future, or you'll be able to retain them as a reserves. All these things are, items that we probably are going to want to delve into further, and maybe tonight isn't quite the night to talk about all the bug dust details. But speaking of the bug dust details, historically, the board and finance committee have been provided with line item detail budgets that include pencils, paper, things of that nature. I refrained from doing that this year. We have all of that information. We're happy to share it with you. I just think sometimes it gets overwhelming for all of you to have to look at. I'm accustomed to looking at all of that information every day, and I'm always happy to share the reports if you wish, but I just wanted to let you know that is a change, and that's why your book is, much smaller than in prior years.
Thank you, Carol. Follow-up, Larry?
Yeah, just one follow-up. You spoke of the wastewater retained earnings. If we didn't spend those, can we use those for another line item, or do we have to save those for future wastewater items?
If you don't spend them, can you use them for what, I'm sorry?
For another line item in another area, or do they stay with the wastewater? So we have to move it in future years rather than use it
So
this year?
your retained earnings will always stay with wastewater unless you can choose to use them to fund projects. You can choose to use them
My
to fund
question is-
capital projects, just like the Water Enterprise Fund does.
But they have to be, it has to be for wastewater, cannot be for something
Exactly.
else. That was my question.
Go ahead, Julie.
Just quick, you just reminded me, what amount do we have going into our OPEB? Is it?
So in the operating budget, we've got $250,000 going into OPEB for your general fund, Water Department, the Water Enterprise Fund. Historically budgets $50,000 a year, and that's what's budgeted for FY23.
Thank
So
you.
a total of 300.
And stabilization?
Nothing, yeah, well, because that's typically a separate article.
Thank
So
you.
these are just the operating, this is just the operating budget.
Anything further, Mary or Don? All set?
No.
The only other line item that I noticed, zero funds, is Arpa funds. Are we using Arpa funds for anything budget-related this year, or not anticipated as of yet?
We have not proposed to use ARPA funds to support any of these expenses, as we have not come forward before the Board of Selectmen to make a presentation. And I expect that we'll be doing that. I think it's on your agenda next week.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Carol. Start with Mark again.
I'm all set, thanks.
Dan?
I have no comments.
Angelo? Mark?
No comment.
Brian? I just got a couple quick questions, Carol, and thank you for putting the budget book together. I know that's very helpful. The new members, it would be really extremely helpful, but even to the seasoned members, it's a very helpful tool for us to understand the full budget thing. You did mention a couple things that I had already thought to ask, the COLA, which I know was a big question mark. In local, and we don't have to get into great detail again, but in local receipts, I see that you had forecasted 16 departments lower forecasts in local receipts, and only 5 departments that were higher in forecasted receipts. One of them that stuck out to me really glaring was the harbor, because I know that the selectmen approved an 8% raise in fees there for mooring fees. And that equates roughly to about $70,000, I think. And yet their local receipts budgeted is lower than the previous years. We can again talk about it in the future, but that was just one thing that struck me as odd, thinking that this is going to be a boom year for a lot of these departments as far as the golf, recreation, hotel receipts and everything like that. So that just stuck out to me.
Well, as far as the harbor is concerned, FY22 budget, one of the line items was budgeted much higher than it should have been, about $150,000. So when you compare it to what the actuals were for FY21, what the budget was for FY22, it had to be, there was no choice other than to reduce it to reflect what was actually received. So we aren't super aggressive on budgeting revenue. We have gotten more aggressive, but we're not so aggressive that we put the town at any type of risk.
No, and I like a conservative approach too, but I also like caution of free cash buildup and stuff like that. So thank you on that. Low receipts. The only other thing that, I don't know if it's mentioned in there, but I'm sure it'll be mentioned somewhere along the way with the selectmen, is the cultural center. And a presentation, I don't know if a formal presentation is being put together for the selectmen on that with Joe, to where we are standing with that, because I know that's a big topic of discussion with a new hire, full-time hire, and the numbers I've seen over the years, it hasn't been a winning proposition. So is that going to be a presentation, a formal presentation? So,
Yes.
so that's about all I have to say. Thank you, Carol, again, and we'll pick up the books. Yeah.
I did find the sentence that I was going to ask Carol about, and it's under free cash reserves. The last sentence in that
Hang on 1 second, Dan. We just gotta make sure you're captured on TV.
Oh, I gotta get my two members too. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I will start over. Under the section on free cash reserves, the last sentence reads, annually, unappropriated free cash expires at the end of each fiscal year. Can you explain that?
Microphone, yep, thank you.
I would be happy to. So free cash, well, it's not free, right? But,
Damn.
it's something particular with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So at the end of the fiscal year, reports are provided of all the expenditures and all the revenue for the general fund to the Department of Revenue, and then they inquire if they have questions or, and free cash is certified. And so what it essentially is the difference between what you actually received in revenues and what you actually expended. At the end of June of every year, at the end of the fiscal year, that number expires. If you haven't used it or you haven't appropriated it, it expires. And we start all over again. We prepare all of the reports. We submit them up to the Department of Revenue. They certify free cash. You can use it for you used it at your fall town meeting. You can use it at your spring town meeting to appropriate money to support projects or to support expenses. But at the end of June of every year, that number goes to zero. And you start the process all over again.
Do those funds just disappear? Or does it get built back into the calculation for next year's? Okay.
So the funds definitely don't disappear. They just start the process of building back that free cash for the following year.
And Mike, I forgot forgot two members that are in Florida. They're on the call. If they have any questions, can we see them, Caleb? Dale or Karen, if you're on the call, if you have any questions on the operating budget, school budget?
Tell them to put down that you're Natonic, right?
Karen, you have a question?
No, I'm good right now. There's a lot to do.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot.
Hi, John. I'm on the call, and I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, enjoy your time down there. Thank you. That's it, Michael, for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up from the board? We'll go on to the next item, which is the motion to submit the budget to the Finance Committee. Mary?
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to submit the fiscal year 2023, year 2023 budget to the Finance Committee
In draft form.
in draft form.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
Roll.
You skipped A, you didn't make a vote.
We'll go back to that.
We'll go back to A.
Thank you. No, go ahead. Let's finish B. Because we already have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
So roll call vote, Don?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Go to A.
Yeah, vote to approve.
I move that we vote to approve or amend the town administrator's draft fiscal year 2023 budget,
Subject to revision.
subject to revision.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
No.
Roll call. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So now we're on to C, discussion on next steps. And the next steps is we generally plan a Saturday, an all-day Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, and we go with the department heads through their budgets. And I know the 5th didn't work for some, the 2nd didn't work for some. Does the 12th work for the Finance Committee and the board? John?
I haven't heard any dates myself. I can put it out to the board and see what, and get back to you as soon as tomorrow, Mike.
Does the 12th work for you, Don?
If he brings food.
And that, Mary?
It does not.
Does not.
I'll be away.
Megan, can we get some dates together from staff and propose dates to the finance committee chair and the board?
Sure,
See if we can make something work.
if it's gonna be in March, it's gonna be the 5th, 12th, 19th, or 26th.
26 gets really
John, can you,
Really late.
yeah, can you propose those dates after the 12th to your,
Sure, I can do that. I think we'd rather do it earlier, because we have to have written recommendations
so the next date would
by
be
the
the 19th?
31st,
If the 5th and the 12th are not good, then yes, the 19th.
19th,
The
okay.
5th didn't work?
5th does not work for
Okay.
me, I don't think. I could do a Sunday.
I could. Can you
Pardon?
Could you do a
Yeah,
Sunday?
I think we do.
I could do a Sunday.
Yeah.
In the past,
Yeah.
last year, I believe you did it in 3 evenings instead of a Saturday. That's another option. It's
Did-
longer.
We did it during the day, I think.
Did you do it during the
Right.
day?
Yeah,
Yeah, they were like 10.
Yeah.
yeah,
I like one day if we can do it.
yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
So I would say the 12th didn't work, so the 13th, which would be a Sunday, or the 19th, which would be a Saturday.
I'm still away on the Sunday. I'm
Okay.
gone for the weekend.
So the 19th would be the Saturday, or the 20th would be the Sunday.
19th?
And so far, I'm not hearing any objection from the
either.
board.
19th is Saturday.
Yeah, but late in the month.
I'll get that out. Do you figure the 19th or the 20th? Is that
I
what?
can't do the 19th or 20th either.
Well, Mary, come on.
I'm just not very cooperative.
We'll just hold the town meeting in June.
Why don't we leave it at, the board's gonna give me the dates that they can meet, and then tomorrow, why don't you see what you guys can get? I don't mind doing a 3-night, but I'd rather do a 1-day.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be better if you give me dates and I can poll my board members with those dates.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's possible
May not be possible to have
to do
everyone
it
here.
during the week either. I'm not sure how many members have obligations during the week. I know Julie does, but she's got some accrued sick time. All right, bounce dates off your membership.
Okay.
It's not gonna be the 19th or 20th, which puts us into the following week,
Two.
which is late, but we're pretty much well into the process at that point, so.
Yeah. Okay, I'll, yeah, 'cause like I say, we have to have, written recommendations by the 31st, and by the following week, we probably have all our meetings and all our votes taken by then. So,
I tell you, does the 5th work for, who does the 5th not work for?
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
How about your board?
I can do
I'll-
that.
I can,
I'm fine.
I'm
Oh,
fine.
no.
Dan, can
no,
you do it?
doesn't work.
The 5th?
Or the 6th.
Angelo?
I could do the 6th.
Mark?
My wife says I'm available.
You're not available.
Does your wife say you're,
Oh,
are
okay.
you
Yes,
available on the
yes.
6th? All right, so let's float the 5th and 6th and see what the membership comes back with, and then we'll pick a date.
Much better.
So far, the 5th is good with us, and
Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
the 6th is good with us, too.
Okay.
Is that Saturday, Friday? I mean, Saturday,
Saturday,
Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah.
And
Right,
I'll
that'd be a better time,
Yep.
Michael. That way we can.
Have more time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll get back to that, so we would look, Mark, and you,
We say the
Come.
5th after lunch.
we could say anything we want. Just give your concerns to John at what time you can
Yeah.
meet, and then we'll go from there, because we've also played with the schedule of department heads based on members'
Yeah.
things as well. So, John, we would look for you to close your portion of the meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the joint meeting of the Finance and Selectmen.
Second.
Okay, do I have a second? We have a second. Mark?
Aye.
Aye. Dan?
Aye.
Angelo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
John is aye. Dale and Karen, if you're still there?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You set a low bar, Mark.
We're on to the consent agenda. November 15th with the minutes we're gonna adjust.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just say that we're
I'll
off.
take this as well, I'm gonna carry both.
And he's crippled. Give me two
Give him 1 minute
Give
to
them a
clear.
minute to clear. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
The only one with my hands is
machines on the air board on this side.
Caleb, do we want to move any mics back, or are we good?
Got me trained.
I'm fine.
Don and I
As long
are
as you can
sharing.
hear us. Are we good?
For the time being.
Okay, Mary, go ahead with the
Okay.
consent agenda.
I move that we vote to approve the consent agenda. First, to approve the town administrator's recommendation to grant permission of N-Star Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, for the purpose to install one fully owned pole labeled pole 58/10 and anchor for electric service for 71 Oliver Snow Road. Second, to approve Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for March 8th, 2021 and March 15th, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
None.
Roll call vote. Dawn?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. We'll take a motion on the next one on A, new business, unless,
I,
go ahead.
I move that we vote to approve the naming of a temporary town clerk in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 14.
And that name would be James Mullen. That's a recommendation from Town Administrator Joe Powers.
Second.
Any discussion? Megan, anything?
He's scheduled to start on the 28th. We'll have an agenda item on your agenda for a vote to appoint.
Okay, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Okay, B, discussion inspection group for licensed establishments. This comes from our conversation we had in the 2.5-hour liquor license, entertainment license summit. And I think we're just formalizing, the theme on the next several agenda items is that. We're looking to formalize having a group. And instruct the town administrator to form such a group. So I would take a motion on that or discussion.
Start with the motion. or-
I'm good with the motion.
I move that we vote to form an inspection group for the licensed establishments.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And the only discussion would be that Joe Powers will form that group. Right now, it's the police chief, fire chief, health director, building commissioner. But I would look to Joe to put a memo together and formalize who the group would be and when it is actually formalized. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? And anyone in the audience, if you want to speak on any of these, just raise your hand. Anyone online want to speak on any of these? Caleb, can we broaden that to everyone that's online? And see when mics go green, we can call on them.
Okay.
Anyone online wish to speak on this? Okay, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Next is discussion and possible vote to amend the Harwich Liquor License Regulation, Section 109, Subsection E. I see we have Attorney Blake online tonight. And Attorney Blake, I'm looking at this, and that's amend the regulation, Section 109E, by removing the term "of source of sound amplification system, whichever is further," under the outdoor entertainment section. Is the board clear on what that is? We discussed boundary lines and we discussed source of amplification, and this request and what came out of that summit was to remove the source of sound amplification system, whichever is further, and just go with boundary line. Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry. I just have a question because in the documents, it notes that if we were to go to the boundary line versus the source of amplification, it would look as if we were favoring, right, one over the other. So we technically, can we even do that?
Yes. I would let Attorney Blake weigh in on that.
Happy to weigh in on it.
Go ahead.
I'm getting a lot of feedback here.
So everybody else's mic's off. Town of Harwich one is on.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback. quick. I'll try to, I don't know if you're getting the feedback, but if you aren't, then I'll just try to get through with it.
We're not,
Actually,
Jeff.
now it's a lot better.
We're
So,
not getting it.
I'm the one that put the comment on. The only reason I put that comment on was because during our workshop, it was brought up that there are some properties that are quite large, and that 150 feet from the boundary line would essentially give them 300 or 400 feet from the source of amplification. So just understand that doing it from the boundary line may or may not put some establishments at somewhat of a disadvantage. I don't think that there's an issue with doing that, because 150 feet from the property line means that you're not giving the noise is not leaving very far from your property. Also, if you look on that section, the red line version, it also says in here, no entertainment at the licensed premises may be conducted in a manner such that the noise from the entertainment is creating a nuisance. So I think in there we've gotten two different standards here, or two different levels that we're looking at. Where a nuisance, which could be well within 150 feet of the boundary line, or the plainly audible from the 150 feet.
Does that make sense, Julie?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, I struggle with this. We discussed it last time, and I struggle because I kind of like coming from the source better. We discussed it last time, and I think we agreed, and I agreed, that the boundary makes sense because it's enforceable. It's hard to keep track of the source. And so I'll stick with that, but I do struggle with it. I wish I had a more concrete opinion.
Thank you, Larry. But I know what you're saying. Mary?
I'm with you, Larry. I know we talked about this at the session, and that wasn't one of the particular things I was interested in, but it made sense to me. But the more I think about it, and I'm more concerned about the smaller establishments, that takes it from center of the facility, if you will, to the edge of the property. I think I'm gonna flip-flop and say we ought to keep source of amplification.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more or less going to agree with that. But before I do that, let me point out there was a third option that nobody looked at. There's the boundary line of the property, but there's also the bounds of the envelope of the building that's on the property, in addition to the point source for the amplification. They're all different. Every one of them is different, unless the band's playing like right next to the side of the building. It's always concerned me about Harwich Port, because that continues to become the conundrum. If we go 150 feet plus the boundary, then you're going way past the first wave of houses. And I'm not sure that protects anybody. So I'm not sure I want to touch this yet, because it's not something that is fleshed out enough where I'd want to make a move, or at least for myself.
I think all great points. My point on this is, we've had extensive conversation about liquor regulations. And liquor regulations, nothing in there really, there is the 150 feet, but we've also instructed the police chief to understand and enforce the liquor regulations and specific to this would be nuisance. Nuisance, and I did call Attorney Blake for some clarifications today. Nuisance could be at 25 feet. Doesn't have to be at 150 feet. And without a zoning change, I don't see how we accomplish anything by not changing it. And I do believe the businesses are as Attorney Blake said today, serving to two masters in the noise bylaw as well as the liquor regulations. I think everybody has to be crystal clear that the board has taken this very, very seriously. The board has ramped up enforcement. This is probably the 5th conversation we've done on regulation changes. And I fully believe that in the regulations under nuisance, a nuisance is a nuisance. And to Julie's point about property size, you would effectively be taking Witchmere Harbor Club, and the noise wouldn't carry beyond their bounds at 150 feet. They'd be inside of 150 feet of their bounds. Same with the Wacquasit Inn. We'll be making keeping a regulation that doesn't allow them to have noise on their own property, just part of it, by source of amplification. Now, I understand Harwich Board. I hope every board member understands Harwich Board, because we've lived this now for a solid 3 years and had a lot of conversations and have taken this very seriously for the residents. So I think the bounds make a heck of a lot more sense on the noise bylaw and what we write in the liquor regulations, keeping in line with there is something called a nuisance. And if it is a nuisance, we can pull their license, and we can pull their entertainment license. And we still have, and now we have, on top of that, the dismissal on the federal lawsuit, which is all kinds of quotes in there from Judge Casper on what we can do and what we can't do. So all of this, we can't regulate separately in different parts of town. Just got proven that, yes, we can. So I don't see the harm in making it boundary line, and I do see, based on Chief Gilmette's statements, comments, that this will make it a lot easier for his officers. I'll open it up to, go ahead, Mary.
I didn't realize that the chief felt boundary line would make his job easier. I was gonna speak to Witchmere and Wequasit, which they're the only ones that really have large enough. But I don't see how anyone's gonna complain, because the 150 feet is still gonna be within the property. So I don't see how this disadvantages them. But if the chief thinks boundary line makes his job easier, I'm in.
Open it up to those in the room first, and that would be Bob, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair,
Bob,
members of the board. I'm Bob Cohn from Pleasant. Can you hear me?
The other Bob.
Bob, you're not up yet. But I know you want to speak.
sorry.
I know you want to speak. I'll call on you when it's your turn.
Bob Cohn, Bob Nickerson's up. So, first off, I totally disagree with the decision, and the reason is because you're going further. You just added on. I really appreciate the level of effort you guys are putting into this. But, okay, let's think about the boundary line. Let's think about the port. You've just given the port 250 more feet of their music going, plus the 150 feet than they do. We're rewarding a group of people that have sued the town and now allow them to play music louder than they did before. I don't get it. I totally don't get it. The second thing is boundary line. So I'm surprised the chief thinks this is easier. So are you going to go out and survey all the points around every property to know where the boundary line is? Because what we have found in all these hearings is when they go to the hearing, the attorneys on the other side say, well, how do you know you're at 150 feet? Well, I looked at Google Earth. Well, how do you know you're to the boundary line? I don't know where the boundary line is. I kind of know where it is. There's a fence there, but is that really right? I can see these guys coming in and getting a surveyor and say, oh, well, exactly where are you? I think it's just going to be very confusing. I think going back to it, like maybe what Dawn said, the building line or something that's really hard and known is nice point. Everybody can see that. The officers can see that. Maybe that makes more sense. But the boundary line to me is way off. I just don't get it. I think you're making it harder on the people. Now you go to Witchmere, which and I already did this yesterday, I measured 150 foot from Witchmere, the closest point, which is at the top of Witchmere, and it goes down 1.5 houses on Davis Lane, if you're familiar with Davis Lane, right? So at 1.5 hours, we go by the $8 million house on the corner, and then we're halfway into the other house. That's 150 foot. If they're playing music on the top of that building, believe me, you're going to hear that way more than 150 foot. It's going to be all along the bluff. So obviously they got to turn it down. So whether you agree or disagree to have the 150 foot from the boundary, I don't think it's going to matter for them, because they're going to be either within their grounds or they're going to be so loud they're going to be way past there.
Which would be a nuisance under the regulations.
Yeah, but if you're going to do the nuisance thing, then I think the chief needs to train his officers and us that call, it's a nuisance. Okay, so right now,
kind of jumping around to the other thing, because these are all kind of merged together. But when anyone calls right now, the police go out and they go to Bob Nickerson's house and say, well, okay, you're less than 150 foot. There's no bearing about where I live. It's a distance to where I hear noise, where I am hearing this. So if my house is at 100 foot and that noise is way out at 500 foot, I should be able to call, and just because I'm at 100 foot, that I have an opportunity to call and complain about it, if that is at 500 foot or 400 foot. And that's not the way that the police have been acting, because they're saying they're stuck on the 150 foot. Nowhere in these regs, alcohol regs, or the bylaw regs, they all say the same thing. I've got all the quotes here, but they say, plainly audible, at a distance of 150 feet. It doesn't mean it has to be 150 feet to my bedroom. It's 150 feet. So I think that all needs to be, I'm excited about the chief. He's going to have a program. He's going to try to train all the guys, everybody be in uniform. I hope Mr. Blake can give them some suggestions on what kind of data they need, so when they go out there, they can win these arguments, and so everybody's happy. But I'm really concerned about having this boundary line stretched out and just making more noise further and further out. You've done a great job, and now I see a swing the other way. So I'll let others talk.
Thank you, Bob. Follow-up from the board, Mary?
The liquor regs, I went through them again today, and there's some great documentation in there. Inside entertainment, no entertainment at the premise may be conducted in a manner such that the noise emanating from the entertainment is creating a nuisance and can be heard outside the boundaries of the premise. No mention of 150 feet. That's what we're gonna hang our hat on, is the nuisance.
And I think that's really important for the chief and the police to go through and get, and you as the board, all be on the same page of how they need to respond to these calls or these issues.
I think that,
Go ahead, Mary.
I think the chief is the one that gave us a proper nudge that we ought to look at our liquor regs and not the noise bylaws, because it's stronger language in the liquor regs.
Well, that goes to your next item, D, I think, or what is it? Let's see, D, because these two are different items, but it goes to that item, and I don't see why you're rescinding the regs either as a reference. They are stronger. Either that or pull that information into your alcohol license.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm saying the liquor regs are stronger.
No,
There's
they're
no mention of the 150 feet in that one I just read you. If it's a nuisance, doesn't say anything about
In the nuisance it
feet.
isn't, but it is in the other part of it.
It's, the 150 feet is mentioned in the liquor reg somewhere.
In
but
another
It is.
part.
I believe
right.
Mary's point was the same as I made. We're gonna regulate these businesses now based on nuisance. We've seen what focusing on the noise bylaw has done, and it hasn't done anything.
Michael,
So-
if you guys can do it on nuisance and the police are behind you on that, that's fantastic.
I hope everybody has heard the in-depth meetings that we've had and the message that we've given the police department and the lawsuit that we have that's now been dismissed. The board didn't back down, the board didn't settle, the board didn't give anyone any leeway. I personally believe this gives us a better tool to be able to enforce and keep peace for the residents individually instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think this goes a lot further using our liquor regulations than the 150-foot rule or the noise bylaw. We're focused more on.
If you're gonna be on top of it with nuisance, and everybody's in agreement, well, these guys are, on how to do it, and it works, it's fine with me. That's the key.
Thank you, Bob. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, hey, yeah, the nuisance one is a good thing to hang your hat on, but my concern is with the 150 feet or not 150 feet, if you use the word entertainment, you're missing the point. There were a hell of a lot of complaints that are based on rowdy exits from the establishments, people making huge party noises that sometimes drowned out the entertainment itself. So I'm still basically with the 150 feet of the building rather than the property line. But
I guess is your question, Don, on the nuisance, is that strictly in your mind related to the entertainment, or is that noise overall? Because for
Noise-
me, it's noise overall.
noise overall, because if you're just saying entertainment, you're missing the larger picture, which is some of these places don't control their patrons, and it's not just the music. The music may encourage them, but I mean, I saw some videos that were posted on the establishment's own site in Instagram. It was like a frat party, and that's where the noise came from. And I know everybody who was testifying, some of those, as the abutters, were complaining that the crowd noise was insanely loud.
Julie, follow up before I
So-
go on to Bob Cohen?
That actually is addressed, again, in the liquor regulations, and it talks all about that, that's their responsibility for exiting just like entering, and a line and all of that, so.
Then we have to enforce it.
Larry, follow up?
No, I think we've discussed it a lot, and I think the nuisance makes sense. I believe it's, unfortunately, Bob, it's not a perfect world. We need to take it, we need to move on this, and we can revisit it if it doesn't work. But I think at this point, we need to, it does us a little to, it serves us a little to keep discussing it over and over again. At some point, we have to make a decision.
Bob Cohen?
Thank you. Good evening again, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Bob Cohn from Pleasant Street, and I sent you a letter along with a PowerPoint, and I was hoping to go over it with you. So if you don't mind, I would like to share my screen. Is that okay?
Fine with me.
Okay. You have to click a few buttons here.
There's not a lot of people on to speak tonight, but Bob, but I would ask you to move it along, as we do have a long meeting, and I imagine the next.
I will do that. So
Bob, is
first
this-
off,
Bob,
there's
mute him real quick. Bob, is this specific
Yeah.
to what we're talking about now, or is it specific to the 150-foot exempt from the noise bylaw?
it has nothing to do with the exemption. It has to do with the outside entertainment licenses.
And the source of amplification?
Right.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I did want to mention, very quickly, there may be some issue with outside, open window inside licenses, because there's a potential, because they can behave like outside licenses, and there's a potential loophole after 10 p.m. And the nuisance issue comes up in this case for inside licenses, in that complaining residents have to prove nuisance, and I think that's another downside of relying too heavily on nuisance. But I'm going to move on from that. And as to the outdoor licenses, I'm just beginning to hear this conversation about nuisance. And I'm just concerned again that it puts a burden on the caller, because it's a somewhat subjective standard rather than the straightforward 150-foot plainly audible standard. But the main thing I want to go over is the proposal to expand the noise range. As it's been implemented to date, the noise range has been measured from the source of sound amplification. But at the workshop meeting, that was thought unworkable because the source would be movable. And the latest is the proposal is to measure from the bounds of the properties. And I think that would have, in the slides ahead, you'll see that would have a very negative impact on residents. So one proposal, it's similar to some of the other ones, would be to measure from a fixed location, and that would be from an approved or designated performance area. That would be a location that would be identified on the premises, where the performance would come from, be the center of the entertainment area, it would be the endpoint for 150-foot measurements. It would be approved by the board during licensing and wouldn't move except with subsequent approval. Would likely use the current performance area, so the noise range would be similar to the current range, minimizing the impact on neighbors. By contrast, measuring from the bounds, I think would increase the range and significantly impact neighbors. And finally, this would even the playing field between venues. I've got a number of maps here. They're all approximate. Google Maps isn't perfect. My drawings on top of it isn't perfect, but I think it's pretty good to give you a rough idea of what's going on. Perks has a very small lot, about 50 by 120. When you grow it out 150 feet in each direction, you end up with 300 feet additional on the east-west axis, 300 feet additional on north-south. and it comes into about 3 acres. Looking at the neighbors who would be inside that range, we have the Sowens, the Beloins, and the Vranoses. And, I've been following this, the noise problems for 5 years or more pretty closely. And I have to say that I have not met or come across any other families that have been so severely impacted by the noise. The Sowens came here in 1985, bought their house in 1985, and with the increase in noise in 2017 or so, they had to give up their guest house business. They abandoned their auxiliary building. They abandoned their western portion of the house. And
Keep it on target, will you? We're not here to talk about
I think
speculation.
I think it is on target to speak to the difficulties these people
I'm
have.
not going to allow second-party conversation, third-party conversation about what somebody may or may not have done with their building. If they're not here to speak of it, then so be it. You keep to your maps and the noise idea, please, and we have to stay on track. But third-party conversations, Bob, we've been through this. The board's very well aware of where the complaints are coming from, and we are addressing it. So skip this part of it, please.
Okay, so I would just say that these people have suffered more than anyone. And when you instead use the measuring from the performance area, this is where I've seen people singing at the green dot. You get something somewhat smaller. It's still 1 2/3 acres. The Solomons are still inside that area. The Beloins and Vranoses are just outside it. But this is roughly the same as current. If we look at the ports map, it's an L-shaped lot with perks tucked inside it. It's about 5 times the size as perks, and when you grow it out, you end up with something like 4.5 acres. Inside that are 7 families who are inside that range. Again, the Sowens, the Beloins, and the Vranoses, along with 4 others. There are 2 parking lots here, and another one behind the church. Noise carries over those parking lots. And it's also been a center of a lot of late night closing time difficulties. When you grant a license of this sort, you're taking and compromising the neighbors' rights to their own property, the very things they pay taxes on, and giving it to the businesses. And in effect, you're pitting businesses against neighbors. These guys have suffered a lot. They've dealt with excessive noise for years. 2 of them were effectively driven from their homes for a time. Another almost was. Several of them have had to deal with extreme late night problems over and above the noise. And 3 of them were attacked on social media last year. So it strikes me as perverse that we are even considering further punishing these victims in order to benefit the very businesses that have been the source of so many problems. And I couldn't urge you more strongly not to go down this path.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm not done. So in addition, this is what it would look like after using it from the performance area. Only the Sowens would be inside it. No one else would be inside it. Looking at Ember, a very irregularly shaped lot. When you expand it at the corners and edges, you get a range of some 5 acres. And inside that, there are 4 detached homes on Bank Street. At the Soundside Court unit condominiums, there are 13 units all inside that area. Sunday school inside that area. The Melrose Retirement Home has 30 units, about half of them are inside that area, for a total of some 10 to 15 units inside that range, for a total of some 27 to 30 households inside that range. These people have all also suffered, and it just strikes me as wrong to go down this path. If you instead use the performance area, it's very similar to the current. 74 Bank would still be inside. Some portion of Soundside Court would still be inside that range. Maybe 5 units for a total of 6. No one from the Melrose Retirement Home would be inside it. It's roughly the same as current. One of the problems that you brought up, Michael, was that concerns about measuring from a fixed location might limit the larger establishments like Witching or Quasset, not allow them to use their entire premises, which is the reason I think we ended up with the whichever is further language to begin with. So this is some draft language that would accommodate the larger properties, I believe. Plainly audible entertainment noise must not exceed the licensed premises beyond 150 feet from the approved performance area. That's pretty good, and it would allow everyone to play within the entire premises at both Witchmere and Wequasset, and would also accommodate the smaller venues such as Perks and Port and Ember. It has a difficulty here because not everyone might have the approved performance area, because I'm not sure you're buying into that yet. But if you were to revert to the source of sound amplification, this quote, this draft language I think would work. Plainly audible entertainment noise must not exceed licensed premises beyond 150 feet from the source of sound amplification. I think that works to accomplish what you're looking for, Michael, and would allow the measurement from the source of sound amplification or from the building or from whatever fixed location. But of course, Attorney Blake would have to go through it. So wrapping up, this is a noise range comparison between the two approaches for Harwich Port only. If you measure 150 feet from the bounds, 7 households in the Perks Port area would be inside that range. 27 at Ember would be inside that range for some total of some 3 dozen households, 1 retirement home, and double the volume. If you measure instead 150 feet from the performance area or from the building or from the source of sound amplification, they're all approximately the same. You'll have half a dozen households. What we currently have, 0 retirement homes and half the volume. So I urge the board to be careful, to not relax the current standards, to not expand the current noise range, and not further impose on residents who have already suffered enough. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
And I'll
Bob.
quit sharing my screen.
Anyone else online? Anyone else with anything further in the public? Back to board deliberation. I'm still at where we've been for the last 3 years, and I believe the board has done its job this year. I believe the enforcement division that we voted to create, I believe that the hearing process, refined hearing process, I believe that the nuisance and actually understanding and enforcing the liquor regulations, I think what that does is that gets rid of the bad actors and doesn't punish the ones that are acting in accordance with the law and that are being sensitive to their neighbors. I believe the board has a hearing process when we start this for any entertainment liquor license where the public can speak. In 2 instances now, we've limited the hours. We've limited what type of music they can play. On some of the Harwich Port licenses, we have already limited what type of music they can play. And I personally think we're punishing a lot because of the mistakes that were made in the past. And to Bob Nickerson's point, as long as I'm on the board, and I believe the police department and police chief have a crystal clear message, and we have a clear path going forward, that the ones that are violating will lose their licenses. They will go through the process, and we will make and alter their license. I don't think that this makes a difference, really, on that, but we're gonna take up the 150-foot rule in a little while on the entertainment licenses and liquor licenses, so we'll have the similar conversation then. So I would take a motion on this or more discussion on this. Don?
Yeah, just a little bit more discussion. If we go down this path, the key to this is going to be a mutual understanding of not just the police department, but the licensees themselves, and that's kind of like the next stuff on the agenda. There has to be a clear understanding that forget the 150 feet, you're going to be subject to problems if you can't control your own crowd coming out of the bar or the establishment. That's the only way this can work.
Crowd noise is big, and I think we've all recognized that. We're not talking about anything new at this point.
Well, I'm not looking for any new litigation. That's what I'm saying, is that if we have mandatory attendance, they come in and they're told, this is the rule right now, this is day 1 of the new rule, and you can expect to be in trouble even if it's less than 150 feet, if this happens.
Well, and I think, Don, to that point, the few that have been bad actors, I think we'll know right away. And I really think the few are probably getting that message. And the police chief having the mandatory meeting, they're going to be very well understood that what a nuisance is, and a nuisance can be in 25 feet. And in the Perk and the Perk and the Port, both of their property lines are on the sidewalk. And if the crowd noise is on the sidewalk, that's a violation and a nuisance. And I think, I won't speak to the police chief, deputy police chief's here tonight, but I think the message has been delivered.
That would even be rowdy Uber pickups.
Julie?
So just to go off of Dawn's comment, there's a couple things. So I had suggested, and I still think it's worthwhile, even with the mandatory, training in this draft that we've got to say people have received the liquor regulations, et cetera, which I think we need to change some language on the receipt confirmation. But that also goes back to the conversation I think that the board should have with the businesses to explain. Like you said, this is no joke. The liquor regulations are such, and we will move on all of these things. And I agree, in terms of lines waiting to get into places, people exiting, it's all in the liquor regulations. So any of those violations, they're subject to any kind of, issue related to that the board can then say, but on this occasion, the police have given us this report and all of this happened. I mean, going back to your point about hiring people to oversee that, that's true, right? You should be overseeing any parking lot that you have people parking at. I mean, there's ways that we can improve things. I think you're right, Michael. We can't go backwards. We're trying to go forwards. And 150 feet hasn't worked. So.
I would just make one comment before we go to a motion. And it's specific. There was several emails sent, and there was 4 or 5. I know Laura Boulogne sent a message. Joe Ganley sent a message. Bob Cohen sent a message. I'm going to miss the other ones. And then there was several on the pro change everything. Joe Ganley, he said it, and he said it crystal clear. The businesses that want to cooperate with the neighbors have reached out to him. Obviously, I would imagine they've reached out to other neighbors too, but they've reached out and said, here's my cell phone. If you have any problems, call me right away. That's responsible. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to get past what's happened and look towards the future, because there's a lot of people that like what's going on in Harwichport. And I'm just going to pick on Harwichport because that seems to be, even in Bob's presentation, the focus. A lot of people like what's going on. A lot of people have visited all these establishments and like it. Some instances, they have not taken into account the quality of life experience for the neighbors, and they're not paying attention to what they're saying. And I think this board is basically saying that we're going to demand that you do, because that's what our liquor regulations say you have to do. And I think that the message is widespread through the police department, through our attorneys, through the Board of Selectmen, through town administrator. I think we got to go forward. So anyone want to make a motion or not make a motion?
Where is it?
And just so we know, we are on.
We are on C, right?
C.
I move that we vote to amend the Harwich Liquor License Regulations, Section 109, Subsection E. And should I read
Yeah.
what it says?
Yeah.
That would,
By removing?
by removing the words from entertainment must be at reasonable sound levels.
No, I think we're off of
Where
that.
is it?
So number 3.
Number 3?
Subsection 9109E, by removing the term or source of sound amplification system, whichever is further
Okay.
under the outdoor. See it right here? I've got it up on
Oh,
Jeff's.
you've got it on.
Just what we're removing.
Okay, amend the regulation section 109E by removing the term, quotes, or source of sound amplification systems, whichever is further, under the outdoor entertainment section.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Reluctantly, aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Jeff. Attorney Blake,
It's,
sorry.
I think that there's more to that than just simply striking out that source of sound amplification, whichever is further. At least the proposal that we had talked about also talked about a statement that amends it to say, no entertainment at the licensed premises may be conducted in a manner such that the noise from the entertainment is creating a nuisance or plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from the boundary line of the premises.
Okay.
By merely striking out what you just voted to strike out, you've left out the nuisance by creating a nuisance, which I think is the one that really strengthens your bylaw.
Thank you.
So I don't know how you want to do it. I mean, I'm happy to give you a motion.
Why don't we get rid of
And,
this?
and
Let me get rid of this motion, and then we'll have you give us a motion, and someone can so move it.
I move we rescind the motion.
You moved that we rescind?
Yeah.
Okay, you second, Don? Yep. Okay, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary? Don? Aye. And I'm an aye. Go ahead, Jeff. Attorney Blake?
So I would say I move to amend the section 109E outdoor entertainment to read as follows. Outdoor entertainment, no entertainment at the licensed premises may be conducted in a manner such that the noise from the entertainment is creating a nuisance or plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from the boundary line of the premises, period.
That's not sufficient.
Go ahead, Don.
And to remove conflicting existing language.
Well, what I'm saying is that you're going to amend it to be just that, period.
I know, but you can't insert that without deleting something to take its place. And to remove existing conflicting language, along with what you said, would be fine.
How about I move to strike out the outside entertainment the existing entertainment, outside entertainment in its entirety, and replace it with the following. Outside entertainment. No entertainment at the licensed premises may be conducted in a manner such that the noise from the entertainment is creating a nuisance or plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from the boundary line of the premises. So I struck it and started with a clean slate and then put in that new paragraph.
Thank you.
Okay, that's my motion, Michael.
And I second it.
So moved by Larry, seconded by Mary.
I can
Don, you're
repeat
okay
it.
with that?
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Okay, what are we on to? D. Discussion and possible vote to create a 2022 annual town meeting warrant article amending the noise bylaw by exempting Mass General Law, Chapter 138 licenses. Discussion, and I will start with Don.
No, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing else that I could add.
Mary?
I was conflicted by that because I don't see harm in keeping the noise bylaw to include the liquor establishments, knowing that we're gonna use the liquor regulations. But I'm told we're one of the few towns that hasn't excluded that. So I'm figuring there must be a good reason to take them out of that and strictly deal with them out of the liquor reg. So if anyone wants to give me some guidance on that.
Julie?
Well, I think basically,
Actually, go ahead. Let me just
No,
call
go
it.
ahead.
Attorney Blake, do you have something on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to say something to that. I mean, what you have is you have your the noise bylaw, and you have your liquor regulations. Your liquor regulations are much more specific and more targeted toward the licensees for Chapter 138 and 183, Section 183A licenses. So typically in the law, the more specific controls, the more general. So that's typically why you see a lot of these noise bylaws exempting Chapter 138, because the Board of Selectmen are regulating those usually a little bit more strictly. And that's why you see them out of there. And also, it makes it a lot clearer for the licensee. Instead of trying to serve two masters, and to the extent that they can make an argument that one conflicts with the other, we are now taking that argument away from them and saying, no, you're going to have to do this one. It's nuisance or 150 feet from the boundary lines, not just 150 feet, which we find in the noise bylaw. So you are covering what you typically cover in your noise bylaw and going a little bit further with the nuisance language that you have in there, together with all of the other provisions in there that talk about keeping noise down from patrons leaving and the like. So I think it's more specific, and it gives everybody a much more concrete idea of what's being required of them.
Thank you, Attorney Blake.
All set.
No, I was just going to say some.
Larry?
I'm all set.
Bob, anything on this one? Anyone else in the audience? Bob Cohen?
Yeah, can I speak?
Yes.
Good evening again. So I was a bit surprised by the idea of exempting the liquor license holders from bylaw. I watched a replay of the discussion. Runs about 10 minutes or so, and there were four main arguments for the exemption. I buy into some of them partly, but not fully, and not all of them. I think my biggest concern is that it feels like we're rushing this to get it into the town meeting without looking at it more thoroughly. The first argument was that there's a conflict. That there's a conflict between the bylaw and liquor regulations. I don't think that's the case in the least. Attorney Senni did an analysis of this last spring, and it pretty much put that to rest. Mr. Powers suggested that mentioning a conflict created a conflict, and I think I get the gist of what he's saying, but I think it's more accurate to say that it raises the specter of a conflict, and the actual language in the provision says the opposite, that it eliminates any chance of a conflict. It says that if there is a conflict between the two documents, there will be no conflict, the liquor regs rules. There's some mention that other towns are doing it. That might be a good thing, but I think we ought to look more closely at the nature of what they're doing, their bylaws and their liquor licenses, and have a better understanding of it. No town that I'm aware of has the same kind of problems that we're having. So I think we need to look at that a little more closely. A third argument was that the exemption would be cleaner. And I think I agree with Mr. Powers' point that the headings, that Section 189, 1G3, and the headings are misleading. The permits versus licenses thing, that's misleading. And I've always found that I've always puzzled over that. So I think Attorney Blake's suggestion to create new headings, I haven't seen the drafts for that, but I would hope that would clean things up a good deal. So what's left, though, is there may be some overlap, but the relationship between the documents, I think, works and is pretty straightforward. In effect, the bylaw grants the liquor license the ability to fully manage its own issues, but if there's something there's a problem, something unanticipated, the bylaw remains in place as a safety net. And that's exactly what happened last year when Chief Gilmet issued a memo saying that any noise 150 feet out from an establishment is a violation. I think that relied on the bylaw. So the two work hand in hand, and this really has not been a source of our noise problems. The last argument was that the liquor regs are more powerful, and I buy that partly, but I think it's more accurate to say that the two documents have separate strengths. The liquor regs penalties are more powerful, that's unquestionable, but I think the bylaw standards are stronger, more objective, and more comprehensive, and I would hate to lose the strengths of either of those documents, which brings me to the arguments against the exemption. The big one, the chief one, perhaps the only one, is that we would lose the bylaw's 150-foot plainly audible standard, which is an important safeguard for residents against crowd noise, which has become a huge issue over the last few years. Because of this, the exemption would be moving in exactly the wrong direction, relaxing the standards and likely imposing more difficulties on neighbors, once again punishing the victims. There are some noise provisions in the liquor regs, but they fall short. The outside entertainment license applies only to entertainment noise, and Section 110D relies on squishy language and judgment calls as opposed to objective standards. The 150-foot plainly audible standard in the bylaw is, in fact, objective, and because of this should be more easily enforced, more easily prosecuted, might hold up better against appeals, because it can't be challenged as having subjective opinions. Ultimately, I think an objective standard is fairer to everyone. Residents don't have to make a case that their welfare or repose is being adversely affected. Businesses don't have to guess how much noise is too much, and officers aren't asked to make judgment calls. So at this point, I have real trouble seeing a compelling need for the exemption, and I certainly don't see an urgent need. The issues raised have not been a source of our noise problem, and my thinking is that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Because it looks like this could very well introduce new problems. I would remind you, the board, that the last time we made a big change to the bylaw on liquor regs was in 2016, when the outdoor licenses were expanded. But that was only done following a public hearing that was continued over 3 separate sessions in November and December of 2016 and lasted more than 3.5 hours. And in spite of all those meetings, I think it's fair to say that no one involved ever anticipated the kind of mess we would end up in over the last several years. By contrast, the discussions on the exemption lasted all of 10 minutes at the workshop, plus however much time I've just spent. And it feels like it's really being rushed in order to get it to town meeting long before it's ready. I do think there may be potential value in the idea of the exemption, but I also think there may be value in further tightening the relationship between the two documents in order to take better advantage of both their strengths or reworking things. But in any case, there are enough doubts and substantial issues that give me real concern. Things work well enough so far, and it really is not an urgent problem. So for now, I'd urge the board to pump the brakes, not rush things. Let's take the time to study the issues in greater depth and take a more cautious, thorough, and prudent approach. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else online? Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear what Bob's saying, and I understand it, but I also understand what the chair's saying and the fact that with or without our participation, there are going to be establishments opening and operating this summer. So I've been the biggest proponent here forever, but town meeting, town meeting, town meeting, town meeting, that's where this is going to go. So, I mean, if there really is a groundswell of the public that would like us to go slower and pump the brakes, put it on the town meeting warrant and they either fly or it's going to go down in flames. But that's the place for it to go.
Thank you, Don. Larry?
No, I agree with Don. I think we move. As I understand it from Jeff, from Attorney Blake said, the liquor license does cover 150 feet as well as the noise. And so I think we've covered that. And I think it is it's time to move and put it on the town warrant.
Julie?
No, I would agree. I think his point of 2 masters is right. Let's stick with the liquor regulations that are more restrictive anyway, and we have more power there.
Mary?
I'm all set.
Okay, a motion?
Okay, I lost it. I move that we vote to create a 2022 annual town meeting warrant article amending the noise bylaw by exempting Mass General Law, Chapter 138 licensees.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call. Don?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I am an aye. E, discussion and possible votes, MGL Chapter 138 licenses. The first is discussion and possible vote to make the town's annual licensing meeting with MGL Chapter 138 licensees mandatory, or license will not be renewed. Annual licenses will meet in November and seasonal in February. Any board discussion on this one, Don?
I think it's something we should do. I mean, even when I had a package license in Dennis, there was a course that there was a meeting we had to go to, and we had to have our people go and do tips training, so why wouldn't we insist on that here?
Agreed. Mary?
I agree.
Julie?
I agree.
Larry?
It's a no-brainer.
Can I get him? Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of this, but I just want to ask you to make sure they really emphasize section 1.10, environments of licensed premises should strongly be strongly stated at the annual meeting. This is all about those limits and what they need to do. They need to really say, and they're going to sign it, so they've read it, and they can't come back and say, we didn't know. So I'm 100% behind this.
I agree. Deputy Chief?
Good evening again, Kevin Considine, Deputy Chief. I just want to make the recommendation of maybe putting some language in there of who should attend the meeting. We actually stole some language from the Yarmouth Police Department, who we met recently, that is going to be helping us do our training. Phil Magnuson, an attorney and retired police officer who handles all the liquor items over there. So I have language, but it pretty much goes to the attending representative shall be one of the following: the manager of record of the license, the licensee, if a natural person, an officer or director of record with the local licensing authority, or the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office of the licensee, which is not of a natural person, or a managing agent of the licensing entity. So just to, make sure we get who we want there is going to be very, very important.
Agreed, thank you. Mary, did you get enough for a
I
motion if you're
got
gonna make it?
manager of record, the licensee, the managing agent. What was the other option?
To get the paper that he was reading.
Oh, now I really love you. Thank you.
Before you make the motion, anyone in the public, anyone else?
Just one quick question. Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Chamber. We have it broken down annually and seasonally. We're almost to March. What are we doing this year? We usually hold it in April for everybody.
That was gonna be my question, but this is gonna be going forward. We should address
Exactly.
what we're gonna do
Yep.
this year. But yeah, thank you, Cindy. Yep. Attorney Blake?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you can see from probably your copy, your red line copy, I have added a subsection C to 1.01. And I would suggest that any additions be made to the new subsection.
Thank you, Attorney Blake. When someone finds that.
Yeah, I'm still scrolling. 1.01?
Under B, or is it D?
Oh, I got it.
No,
All licensees, new and renewals, shall annually attend the Chief of Police's annual license meeting with General Laws, Chapter 138 licensees. Annual licensees will meet in November and seasonal in February. Failure to attend the chief's meeting shall result in a denial of a new license and the non-renewal of a previously held license. Is that the language you were speaking?
That's the language I was speaking, and then maybe you could tack on what the deputy chief just gave you to that
Okay.
to that subsection.
Okay,
Go for it.
go for it? All right.
If anyone lights up green after your motion, I'll call on them.
I move that we vote to change I move that we vote to change the Harwich liquor regulations, section 101.c, that will, striking out what was previously there, and it shall say, all licensees, new and renewals, shall annually attend the Chief of Police's annual license meeting with General Laws, Chapter 138 licensees. Annual licensees will meet in November and seasonal in February. Failure to attend the chief's meeting shall result in a denial of a new license and the non-renewal of a previously held license. The attending representative shall be one of the following: the manager of record on the license, the licensee if a natural person, an officer or director of record with the local licensing authority, or the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office of a licensee which is not a natural person, or a managing agent of the licensed entity.
Any second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Attorney Blake, that covers it?
I believe that covers it, yes.
Thank you. Larry?
No discussion.
Any discussion, Mary?
Nope.
Don?
Yeah, we're blowing off a year
Because we're not doing it this year?
because we're not doing it this year. I still feel that we need to do something
Well, no,
analogous.
We'll do it this year.
By no means am I saying that we shouldn't have a meeting this year. It might just be more in the format that we've been using. Going backwards on licenses we've already issued, I'm not sure that we can make it a mandatory, but.
No, I get it. I just
agree.
don't want anybody to say, well, I didn't know that.
No, so can I, and
Go
and
ahead.
I think that's a good point, and I think we need to, because we want to roll something out, this kind of ties in with what I was talking about before, of having a meeting with the community, the businesses, and having that discussion. And for that matter, that's something we should attend, right? And we should have a conversation about what this new overview of the board is in terms of the nuisance, the changes that we've made and why we're making them, and that we mean business and that they need to attend, and that they're gonna be signing off, that they've got all these regulations, and I think that's our message, and that's what we personally need to come together to a meeting.
Agreed. Mary?
Why can't it be effective for this year?
We've already,
Does this have to
Megan?
go to town meeting?
We have not we have not sent out renewals for seasonal renewals yet. So if you're thinking we've already issued seasonal licenses, we have not issued any seasonal liquor licenses.
so we can do it on seasonal, we're gonna have a meeting on the annuals because we've already.
Because we already did them. Yep.
Don?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, that's a different we. The people that are going to be meeting are the licensing board, which happens to be us, but
Right, but I'm saying we should attend, and we should attend both, because the message is to both.
Seasonal and
Seasonal and, right.
through you, Mr. Chair, to Attorney Blake, is it appropriate, though, at the front end for the licensing authority to attend such a meeting?
I don't see an issue with you attending the meeting.
That's what I'm asking.
No.
That's a
No,
good question,
I
because in the
don't.
past, we've been advised not to attend.
Right, right.
That's why I asked.
Okay, we'll set that up. Roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Discussion and possible vote to implement that each Mass General Law, Chapter 138 license sign an acknowledgement receipt that they have received the Town of Harwich liquor license regulations. This receipt will be sent with annual seasonal license renewal packages. That's footnote. Julie, you had comments on language. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I just think that we need to say, I, the undersigned, acknowledge receiving a copy of the Harwich Board of Selectmen liquor license regulations. I understand that it is my responsibility to review, comprehend, and I would say we need to add and adhere to the regulations and the information contained within the regulations and distribute to staff.
Adhere and train.
Yeah, like
staff.
adhere and train, but I would definitely say adhere, because we're only saying review and understand.
Any comments on that, Larry?
I think those are good comments, Julie, so.
Mary?
I like that, Julie, because I missed that, but I was gonna add, instead of and distribute to staff, and ensure that all employees who work in the public areas of the premises read and comply with the Harwich liquor license regulations. And I stole that right out of the liquor regs.
Okay. Good luck to you two making a motion together, but Hank, we'll get to that. Don?
Yeah, I'm just being a stickler again, because it really shouldn't read with the Harwich Board of Selectmen. It should be reading the Harwich Liquor Licensing Authority, parentheses, the selectmen doing, selectmen acting as that authority.
Okay. Attorney Blake?
I'm fine with that. I don't have in front of me what you're reading, but I'm fine with, rather than the Board of Selectmen saying the local licensing authority.
And Attorney Blake, we'll get these to you after they do the minutes, so you know what to draft for the changes, exactly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Say Harwich. Right. Oh, can I read your writing?
Hang on while we craft a motion. I guess I would say, does anyone want to speak to this? All set? All set? No lights on online, so we'll wait for a motion.
Okay. I move that we vote to implement that each Mass General Law, Chapter 138 licensee sign an acknowledgement receipt that they have received the local licensing authorities' liquor license regulations. Do I read the whole acknowledgement?
Yeah, I would add
Okay.
language, yeah.
And the language in the acknowledgement will say, confirmation of the receipt of the Harwich Board of Selectmen liquor license regulations. I, the undersigned, acknowledge receiving a copy of the Harwich Local Licensing Authority regulations. I understand that it is my responsibility to review, comprehend, and adhere to the information contained within the regulations, and to ensure that all employees who work in the public areas of the premises read and comply with the Harwich liquor license regulations.
I'll second it, but I'm going to point out to Megan that the header for that should also change. confirmation of receipt of the Harwich Local Licensing Authority.
Yep, you can just change that.
I'm
That's
just gonna give this to Megan.
But that's, my second is based on, that's what you said.
Okay. And Don, just repeat that so everybody knows. Not the whole motion.
Just a heads.
Just the addition.
Confirmation of receipt of the Harwich Local Licensing Authority regulations.
And that's the header.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that was part of the second?
Yes, second.
Yep.
Thank you. Any discussion? No. Larry, roll call.
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. All right, the next one should be easy.
So he says.
F.
F, I move that we vote on the miscellaneous reappointments
Second.
As listed.
as
Uh,
listed.
Yeah.
Okay, moved and seconded. Don, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want everybody to know, because Ellen and I kind of were working on that over the last year. I still want to get our arms around the receiving agencies have their own requirements for expirations of terms and everything. This is great because we've let everything lapse and we really need to appoint these. But moving on, we really have to analyze, okay, this board expects a term of years, and that's what we have to appoint them for. And if there's a vacancy, then we'll appoint somebody to fill the remaining portion of that. We have not been able to recapture that over the last year and a half.
Gotcha.
And if I may, Michael, to add to that, HARC, the Accessibility Rights Committee, that is a federal requirement that we have someone appointed to that. I would like to add that to this list as well.
Which one was that, Larry?
The Accessible Disability Rights Committee, ADA.
Someone on that committee's in this room, so maybe she'll get that on there.
Yeah, Megan, I think I'm right, Megan, that is a requirement, so we should make that, raise the status as well.
There's a few more too, but this is going to nail down what we need to have done because none of these people were appointed last year.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I am an aye. G was moved up, so we're not on that. So old business, we're gonna do updates, and we will go to Megan Eldridge, Assistant Town Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item is an update on 5 Bells Neck Road. We did attempt to do an RFP, as you remember, to get a brokerage company to market the property, which yielded no proposals. So we have redeveloped the RFP to put it back out to the public for sale of the property. The dates for this RFP, we put it in the Central Register, which is a requirement of 30B, and it needs to be in the Central Register for 30 days. So that's why this timeline is what it is. We put it in on February 9th, and it was posted on February 16th. We've put the ad in the paper to the Chronicle, which will go out next week, the 28th of February, which will make for printing on March 3rd, and then again the following week on March 10th. We've set up a site walkthrough. This is open to anyone of the public or anyone interested in submitting a bid. And that site walkthrough is set for March 15th at 10 a.m. We will be there to answer questions of anyone who's looking to have a site walkthrough, be able to get into the building that day. And the bids are due for opening on Friday, March 25th, and they should be in by 2 o'clock p.m., and we will open the bids at that time. We do have evaluation criteria in the RFP that shows what highly advantageous, and not advantageous are what we're looking for that.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Larry?
No.
Julie?
No, I don't have.
Mary?
All set.
Don?
Just to reiterate, I think we're in a foot race against town meeting. I'm not sure why we're doing this at this point instead of 60 days from now.
Thank you. I have no comments.
Okay. The next one is 203 Bank Street, and this is the RFP that we put out for appraisals. These parcels were put out for sale, or put out to be sold by town meeting, and we have contracted with Clancy Appraisals to do the appraisal of this property. We had a good conversation with him last week, and he's indicated that this appraisal can be done in about 6 weeks. So maybe 5 weeks from now, you should see something on your agenda on this one again.
Before we move on, I do have
Go
a
ahead.
question about this one.
Yep.
In the aspect to be sure we get most value for the property, we had talked at one time, this RFP, if I understand, is going out with one, he's gonna do it all as one site plan, not, and it'd be the last time we had the discussion on this, we were going to do both. We were gonna do individually and one overall site. And I don't know which way is better. I'll leave that to others' judgment. But I know sometimes in the past, my own experience, having multiple sites gives you a bigger value than having one overall site. And so I'm a little concerned about throwing that out. I just want to be sure we don't leave money on the table.
Okay, we can speak to the appraisal service and ask to have different scenarios as far as the value of that one parcel that has the building on it versus that
And
with
it could
the
be
other
that's
parcels.
enough. I just need assurance that we're going to get the most
And
value.
then we'll have a discussion again before this gets, the
Right.
RFP gets approved.
Yeah.
Sure, yes, before the RFP is developed, you'll hear about it again.
Don or Mary, anything on that? All set? Julie's all set?
Not much of an update on Judah Eldridge parcel, other than we did get a survey quote, and we need some direction on where the funding source is going to be for this $26,000 estimate. Do you recommend CPC be requested, or are we looking at using operating budget money that we don't actually have budgeted for this? So we're just looking for some direction.
The last I got from the town administrator, they were looking, Carol was looking to see if there was any funding. So if the answer now is there isn't, then I'll put it on for a more broad discussion.
Okay.
CPC, in my mind, this was a dogfight, I think, and I'm not sure they'd have an appetite for us going back to them for any money.
Okay.
And then the other question that was asked at the last time we discussed this was, actually it was on tax title and liens, the value of this property has gone up almost 200,000 from when we bid it. Well, not the value. Value's low in my opinion. The tax lien. So is there a mechanism to get rid of some of the value of this on the tax lien? Because CPC is only going to give us what CPC gave us, and it's getting to the point where the appraisal's going to come in a lot lower than what the tax lien is, a lot lower, because this is a mess.
Okay.
How do we get rid of the tax lien that is over and above what the actual value of the land is?
I can speak with Amy
Okay.
about that. Find out
And
what we
then,
can do.
I guess I'll look to Joe, or you can look to Joe, because we're meeting tomorrow on looking at funding sources.
Sounds good.
We need to get this one done. This is another one that's been going on for a long time.
Like yesterday, we need it done.
We promised CPC we would get this done,
Yeah,
so.
we did.
Okay. Moving on to the request for proposals for the Saquatucket Harbor Snack Shack food concession stand. We did open the 2 proposals we received on Friday, the 11th. We received 2 responsive and responsible proposals. We evaluated each proposal thoroughly using minimum criteria as well as comparative criteria. We received the first proposal from Ashwood Food, which is the vendor who currently, or had the facility last year. And then the second one was from a vendor that goes by the name of Poco NYC. Their proposal showed highly satisfactory evaluation criteria and a higher price proposal than the proposal from Ashwood Foods. So the proposal from Ashwood Foods had a $4,000 per year, plus, I believe it was 4%. And then the Poco New York had a $10,000 per year with escalating percentages of their net sales. So after review, Joe and I decided to recommend the contract to go to BCAF LLC, DBA Poco New NYC.
Now, that would come back to the board for our vote on whether to accept it or not, or is that done?
Unless you have any strong objections to that, we will be getting a contract together and going over the particulars as far as hours of operation with the Grizzles.
Comments from the board, Don?
Yeah, this is a general comment because we've been down this road for like a number of years, the chair and I particularly. If we're going to have something in a packet, it really needs to say as opposed to what. You alluded to it being a superior price to the advantage of the town, but there's no way of knowing because it wasn't in the packet. The first time I heard any numbers was when you just said that.
They're in the confidential file.
I know, but the public doesn't know that.
Oh, okay.
The other part of the agenda has their part of it in it. So as opposed to what is really important to the public.
I got you. Megan, comments on that?
The proposal from Ashwood was not included in the confidential one because it was not considered to be highly advantageous.
And then what about the proposal number-wise to the public? Is that not something we release to the public until later, or is that?
Everything's negotiable, so we didn't want to put a number into
I got you.
the agenda.
Board pleasure to talk about this next week to say whether or not we approve it, or do we want to let them proceed how they are? Mary?
I just had one question. Where they're from New York and kind of an unknown to us, I assume you and Joe have or are going to call some of those references and
Yes.
scope them out?
We have called references, and they do live in town, so they're not only from town, but they also have a restaurant in New York City. So it would be a dual business, and this is where they prefer to be long-term, so their efforts will go into the snack shack here as more of a long-term project.
Thank you.
Julie?
I also thought that they put a lot of information in there on training, and I thought that was great based on the discussion we just had on alcohol license training, so I thought it was a pretty thorough application.
Larry?
It was a good application. I'm with Don. I would have liked to see the other just for comparison's sake.
So the board will get that tomorrow?
Sure.
Great.
Can send them
And then
both.
if any board member has a question or wants to revisit, then we'll revisit it.
That's all I was interested in.
Okay. But if we,
And all RFP proposals, the results are on the website as well.
okay.
When you go to the website, you can link in and see what the bid results were.
My only comment is I think the value, I think that facility is second to none, and the location is definitely second to none, and I would have thought it would have brought a lot more money than what it brought. But
So 5 and 5.
I guess we'll see what the 5%, we'll see what the 5% is at the end.
Well, it's new. We need a bit of a track record to be a
Right.
lot. We need a successful business.
Okay.
effort.
Moving on, thank you.
Moving on,
Michael, I don't know if Peter, do you wish to speak to this? Okay.
and then the last update is for Cranberry Valley Restaurant. That proposal did not yield any bids on that, so we have turned that right around, and we'll put that back out in the paper this week, and for proposal openings on March 11th. So hopefully we'll get some more interest this time around.
Thank you. Town administrators report?
You have a
Do we have more?
contract. Yeah.
Contract. There's a second page. You can. Yep, stand right up to the mic.
I'm Pete from Ashwood Food Service, Pete Claus, Decorated. And we did win the bid last year at the end of the season, and we thought we had done ourselves very well, and the town also. But what we read in the RFP was that financial was not going to be the only part of the bid. And we also put in there 4%, which the town can really benefit greatly if things work out as they should with a full season under our belts. But if the town is only considering the financial side, then we understand what the town's thinking about. The golf course, we, out of courtesy to Ron, we did not bid on it because Ron's been there for many years, and that's just another businessman in town that I was gonna respect. If he's not gonna go for it, we would go for it. We could combine the both, which I know was part of the idea, but as I said, we were, as a courtesy to Ron, we were not gonna bid on it. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And the golf course is going back out.
The golf course is going back out, and when we went over the criteria for the snack shack, they were equal in highly advantageous and advantageous. So the only significant difference was their price. So both were found to be highly advantageous in all categories, and the breaking point was the price proposal.
Thank you.
Okay,
Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder, is Ron not interested? Do we have information on the golf course, or?
Ron told us last year he wasn't interested.
Yeah,
He-
so,
You know, his last lease, he was not.
so I may,
He did say to our golf director that he was not bidding on it.
okay, I just want to get that out there then, if that's true.
Okay, contracts, Mary?
I move that we vote to authorize the chair to sign the Department of Energy Resources, DOER, Green Communities Division Competitive Grant Award in the amount of $160,952.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Roll call, Don?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Larry? I'm gonna back up just a step, and I would actually like to see both proposals from the harbor. And I would also just like to see the last two tenants, what the bids were on that, what they paid us, the actuals.
The last two tenants from the last 2 years.
Dockside and Peter, Jake Rudy's on the last one.
Sure.
And I personally would like to renew that, look at them, and I don't know if the board would entertain further conversation on this, or if you just want to be done with it.
No, I would like to do exactly what you just said, and that's why I said that, as opposed to what? I'd like to be able to see the whole thing as a picture.
Yeah, if I'm going to spend the time looking at the numbers, I'd like to look at.
Is it okay to wait a week for the
Yeah.
administration to get into contract negotiations so that we can look at this one more time?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, but I guess my question is, what do we, I mean, whatever you want to do, I'm fine with, but I think it's important that we make a decision, because obviously it's almost the end of February.
Right.
The RFP was put out along this time frame in order to get an April 1st opening, to have any shot at getting a seasonal liquor license. Those do take 6 to 8 weeks at the state.
And that was a negative last year when we look at the numbers, because he was unable to get a liquor license.
Yes.
It was, they were going to charge him a full season
Well,
price for the liquor license, so.
Fair is fair then. I mean, I'm fine if we want to just allow the process to continue on. I don't want to hold anything up.
But it could continue on within that time frame. I'm not gonna vote for anything where I don't know anything more than just the one offer. It's a competitive
Oh,
bid.
you don't have to vote, we're not voting today, right? We're just
No.
gonna bring it back next week. I don't have a problem with that, I'm just saying, if we're gonna do it, we either
Yeah,
do
we
it
gotta
next
do it
week.
soon, so
We
we
should-
could do what
It
you
has
were
to be
saying.
next week. Yeah, it has,
Megan, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Okay.
Town administrators report.
We have one contract that was signed for a new driving range nets at the golf course. They're replacing about 12,000 square feet of netting and all of the hardware. They went out to bid and got some quotes, and the low bid went to 4net in the amount of $16,500. The contract has been signed by the town administrator. And then the last thing in the TA's report is a monthly report from the treasurer collector's office.
Excellent. Selectmen's report, Larry?
None.
Julie?
none.
Mary?
None.
Don?
None.
And I have none. Motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I am an aye.